Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello, and welcome back to the best homeschool podcast on the planet. If that planet is your phone and your YouTube channel and you're listening to us right now, it's the number one podcast in your ears. Brought to you by the intergalactic community of...
You're so silly. So thanks for joining us today. We wanted to talk about an important subject to us because we're having some things go on with our daughter right now where comparisons. She's starting to become sentient enough right now that she's 8.5.
The AGI is real.
Yeah, and she's starting to look around at what other kids are doing. And she's starting to feel that comparison game about where am I at with my studies versus them.
And this is interesting because it's probably going to evolve over time. It's going to be comparing body, issues and clothing, and it's just all of the things of comparison. So she's starting to think about herself with respect to other kids, and we're noticing this a little bit.
Right. And as parents, I think it's natural for us too to be kind of keeping an eye on our, with our homeschooling friends and other people in our co-ops and things what are their kids doing? How much are their kids reading? Right. It's a natural human trait to want to compare against others.
But also within the homeschooling world, in the public school, you compare by what is your grade? What is your test score? And that type of thing. In ours, it's this decentralized education community, right? We're all doing our own thing. And then we're trying to understand, okay, there's that fear inside of us as educators. Are we doing enough? Are we failing? And so you start to look across and go, what are they doing? What are they doing? And
you're right. It's more intangible.
Yeah. We want to know that we're doing a good job and we're doing well. And some of us do that by saying, okay, where is she on grade level? How is she moving through the curriculums? What are the things that she knows and looking at Common Core standards and saying, okay, we know she's doing fine in math. We don't have to even think about that. I don't even compare even, subconsciously to any other kid on math because I know she's doing well. But reading wise, we know she's right on grade level. She's right there.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit.
Maybe just right a little
below.
bit. A little bit below. And so those are starting to be those things where we start to think about, okay, how can we get better? How can we improve this? How can we focus on this? And how does that manifest in our child's mentality and also in our own mentalities? Right.
It's been something we've been trying to keep reminding ourselves about.
Yeah.
And this has come up in sports too, right? There's a lot of comparison with how she's comparing herself to the other players on her team.
That was actually very, very true this year. She did notice that. And a few times she asked me, she goes, Daddy, I don't think I'm the best player on the team. And I said, you're probably right. But what are you comparing against? You're not the best dribbler on the team. Of course, your friend is. But I think you're the best defender on the team, right? You might not be as good as doing the shooting as this other player, but you have your own things that you're good at. But she was starting to look across and say, well, am I not the best? I'm not the best player, and start to have that affect her. But you had to step in and say, well, listen, you're developing. This is your second year. Those girls have been playing for 3 or 4 years, so they have more time and experience, and you're just having to
And are you enjoying yourself?
Yeah. Are you having fun?
Right. There's other things. So this episode is really about kind of trying to unpack this comparison thing. We know why we do it, but and we know that we shouldn't do it. Right? We shouldn't compare to other people, and it doesn't matter what the Joneses are doing. We should just keep on trucking on. So
those Joneses.
Yeah, we know that intuitively, and yet we still do compare. So one of the things we wanted to look into today, I just wanted to do some research on, what are the reasons that comparing the level of different kids is just it's not accurate and it's not helpful. Right? To help remind us to not be paying attention to our friend's daughter who's reading full chapter books and our daughter is still reading level 1 readers.
Yeah,
Right? Like, and they're exactly the same age by a couple of weeks.
Yep.
I'm hoping that this will be a little cathartic for us too in helping us just keep these things in mind.
So the first thing we talk about is, the idea of unique learning paths, right?
Right. All kids learn in diverse ways, and some really excel in traditional classroom settings, and others really thrive in more flexible environments. Some are unschoolers. There's no one right way to learn because everyone is so different. So we have to remember that.
Along this path, especially us as homeschoolers early on, we may not even know what the right path is yet. We're testing those things.
Absolutely.
And that's not us failing. They wouldn't be given that time to have that unique educational experience in the public schools or even private schools. But here we're having the opportunity to find what is most optimal. And then once we find that optimal speed or that optimal method, it's going to go for a certain amount of time, and maybe it changes over time, or maybe it pivots a little bit differently and we're able to pivot with them. That optimal, what we're doing is we're finding that optimal path through that arc of education from, when they're kindergartners all the way till 12th grade, or for whatever stretch that you're doing homeschooling, you'll be able to find that optimal path.
Well, and I think even optimal, to me, I struggle a little bit with that, to be honest, about we keep just searching for the perfect thing for our kid. And that's hard too. So maybe in my mind, we're not searching for optimal as much as we're searching for a path that is healthy, where our child is growing and is happy. Could it be more perfect? I'm sure it could.
It always can be perfect.
But
that's the definition of perfect, is it's the unattainable.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some point of we got to be good enough that we found something that our child likes. They're growing. It's a healthy relationship with how we're teaching them.
They're making progress. They're staying on task. They're enjoying themselves. I mean, all those various intangible things. It's not just to say perfection. You're right. It's too specific.
Yeah.
And we know that it's kind of like, are we within the guardrails of success?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think we have to just be careful about that. The other thing is that there's a unique pace of development for every kid. Every child is going to learn and develop at different rates. And so comparing how our child progresses to others really creates a lot of unnecessary pressure. And, everyone's on a different developmental timeline. I know I was talking to a acquaintance, and she taught second grade for many, many years. And we were talking about reading, and I was telling her, our daughter is, she's not really enjoying it yet, and she's made tremendous progress, but she's still, below her peers. It's something that it's a big challenge for her. And she goes, it's like a puzzle piece. When they're ready, when they're developmentally ready, those pieces will snap together. And before they are, you just have to make sure that you don't, kill that desire to read in your efforts to try to help them get there. Yeah. And that really had a profound effect on me that,
kill the plant before it's growing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that it is really a puzzle, getting their mind to be able to look at these squiggles on a page and make words and comprehend and be able to get that. It's not an easy thing.
No. And you're right. It is a challenge, and we take it for granted because I know I run into the problem of looking down and saying, well, reading to me is easy and math is easy. And you forget how hard of a task and this thing is. Right, because we've been
reading for so many years at this point.
You just take it for granted, and you just like, why don't you just get this? Well, developmentally, they're just not there. And I think that's just something I always have to check in my own mind, that, just understand that it's a process and make it as fun as possible as you can. And it's okay to get frustrated from time to time, and we all do. And you're not failing if you do, and it's not failing if your child gets a little frustrated and you guys have a bad day. Just come back to it the next day and try to make it positive. But, you're right. It is a process. And I have really sat back in the last 6 or 7 months. We're doing our curriculum and we're doing the reading, but I have really tried to dial back any type of pressure on her on that. And
because we know she's putting a lot of pressure on herself.
She's putting pressure on herself, and she's working. And I always have this line, I've told you this before with basketball, like in sports. I don't care about winning, because there's always a better team. There's always a better player. There's going to be better coaches and all that type of stuff. You're always going to run into a better player all the way up to the top. And what I hate about, what I tell the kids in basketball is I don't care about winning. I just don't want you to lose. And it's a subtle difference. Losing, the way I define it, is giving up, quitting, not trying hard, and all that type of stuff, right? Because you can go play a game, and if the score comes out not in your favor, but you worked really hard, you played as a team, you guys succeeded in the things you guys can do, and you made progress, and you didn't give up. To me, it's not winning, but it's like you didn't lose because you tried your hardest.
You didn't beat yourself.
Yeah, it's like it's okay to lose a game because there's always going to be someone better.
Sure.
It's true. I heard a great piece of advice that said, when you walk into a room, it's likely there's someone smarter than you and more talented than you in almost everything you can do, right? But the one thing you can control are two things: your emotions and how hard you work. And in that respect, you can walk into the room and say, I'm going to be the hardest working person here, right? Within what I can do, and I'm not going to give up and whatnot. And really, I've started to map that type of behavior as like, I just want her to have fun. I want her to work hard. I don't want her to like not read and like walk away from books. Hey, let's read a book. Let's read a short story. Let's have you read this, math problem, the word problem. And if you get stuck, ask me and I'm here to help you. And we're going to walk through it. It's going to be no big deal and try to make it, but I want her to work at it, that type of thing. But I'm not as in my own mind, I'm not trying to win. Like, I don't want the score to be in our favor every time.
Right.
And I've kind of walked back from that. And I think it has been helping her. But I understand now that as she's getting older, she's starting to think about these things.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about some of the reasons why, because of, what activity she's doing and where she's seeing the comparisons and whatnot.
Yeah, I think this is one place where homeschooling helps us a lot in that we can adapt things, right? When we can see that our child's development pace or their learning path is diverging from the path of the curriculum or the other, friends we have and how they taught their child how to read or whatever. When we can see that it's changing, we can say, well, let's focus on what she needs. Yeah. And we'll adapt it.
We say this all the time. We're like, my goodness, what would it be like for her to be in a classroom right now?
Right.
Being in a classroom, being given activity sheets, expected to read those activity sheets, to do these type of things, she wouldn't be ready for it, and she would get even more discouraged.
Yeah, I think that as much as we can keep things kind of light is great. The other thing that's a real reason why we shouldn't compare is that there are different priorities for different families, right? Oh, yeah. Every family's got its own values and beliefs and their priorities, and that really influences their educational choices. So there's going to be other families that they pushed hard on something really early and their child is excelling. And that's maybe not something, maybe we have a more relaxed approach.
And maybe that's true about us, because I really value math. I value it as a thinking methodology. It's the first language. Kids can objectively count. I think math is the language that if you ever meet the aliens, that's the first language you speak.
That's what you care about.
That's what you care about, right? Like they did it in, if you remember the movie Arrival, one of the first things they establish is numbers, right? And counting and everything. And so I always see math as a way of like thinking. And so maybe I push that a little bit harder. Maybe that's the reason why she's as ahead as she is. And also I enjoy math. I enjoy the act of doing math, and maybe that passion came out a little bit more in that respect, and maybe that's the reason why she's ahead, or maybe she just has an aptitude to it. I don't know. Maybe it's a genetics thing. Yeah. It's probably more of your genetics than my genetics.
I don't know. You're really good at math. I'm not sure. But that's the thing, right? Yeah. We all are going to prioritize different aspects, right? So some families may be prioritizing character development and critical thinking skills and other special interests, and saying, the reading and the math will follow. Let's work on these things. I mean, everyone's family is different. And because we're all educators, we can't say that we're all going to educate in exactly the same way. And that's why we homeschool, because we don't want to educate. This is not a factory where all homeschoolers are going to educate identically. So, that's why we just have to realize there's different emphasis. We know some families that are just like super science families. They are all about it. This little girl that just joined our Girl Scout troop, my goodness, she's like 6, and or 7 maybe, her science brain is crazy because their family loves science, and that's just a big thing for her. Our daughter would not compare nearly that well on science. It's just not her thing. We have some other friends who love poetry. Their daughter can recite poetry. They love it. That's like their thing. That's their love language. That's just not our family, right? That's not our priority. So I think that rather than comparing, our child's progress to those, we got to focus really on aligning our homeschool journey with what our family values and what our goals are, and what matters most, is that our kids receive an education that really reflects our values and the individual needs of our kids. So this was helpful for me when I did this research to just remember that.
Well, and the next thing is to understand that every kid has some diverse strengths and weaknesses, right?
Yes.
And kind of if you remember the scene from Jurassic Park, right, where Ian Malcolm was hitting on Ellie, was it Ellie, right?
Yeah, Ellie
Sadler. Yep. And he dropped the water on her wrist, and it fell one way, and the next time it fell the other way. So we have this giant genetic pool, and you have this baby, and they have initial starting conditions that are different. Every single kid is different, and then eventually through environment, through nurture, and all that type of stuff, that kind of the Plinko machine of life, the kids move in different arcs and paths, right? And by doing that, they have different skills and they have different capabilities. Eventually, all those skills get turned on, and all those capabilities get turned on to a base level, whatever that might be, reading and doing math and physical activity and walking and running and doing all these things, right? You have a base level of capability that eventually we see manifest at age 12 or 13 or 14, whatever that might be. But some kids moving in certain directions faster because of just starting conditions or genetic conditions or natural aptitude and whatever. And we just have to sit back and just realize that our kids are all Plinko machines. Like our daughter's really, really amazing auditory learner, right? She can listen to stories. She has a lot of patience. She has a lot of creativity. And that's really great. And then our other daughter is a firecracker. She's ready to move and do all these crazy stuff, but also she has this incredible ability of art and coloring and whatnot. And she seems to have an aptitude to math and reading, but she's not as patient as our older kind, right? So,
and our older daughter really has trouble with memorization. She's just not very good at memorization. And it's really been a struggle for her to memorize some of these, phonics things. And that's hurting the reading. Our younger daughter can see a word, and then remember that she just read that word. Our older daughter could read the same word on a page 5 times and not remember.
But our younger daughter gets very frustrated
Super
quickly
frustrated.
Because it's not going the right way and whatnot. And our older daughter would just kind of go with the flow a little bit more and a little bit more amenable. And she's a little bit more emotional and empathetic than our younger daughter. So it's just like they all have different skills and different capabilities. And we hope over time, they can cultivate this base level of capability. But again, that's, I think, where some of the keeping up with the Joneses thing is, why isn't my kid moving in this one tranche of capabilities as fast as this kid, right? That type of thing.
Right. And it really depends on the pool that you're swimming in as well.
Exactly.
And what the other kids are expressing talent in or excelling in. So our daughter is in a couple of classes at her parent partnership where she is in with older students. Her dance class in particular, she is a good enough dancer that she's actually 2 grade levels up because of the way the dancing classes break.
A couple of her classes that she's been taking them for multiple years. And we felt we wanted to ask, does she want to go through this remedial class again, or do we want to level her up? And we asked. And we leveled, and they said, yeah, absolutely.
Because the classes
she's more than capable. Yeah, the teacher said she's more than capable. Let's move her up.
The classes there span multiple years. So it's like if she's in a K through 2 class, she's done it for 2 years. She's in 2nd grade now. The next class isn't supposed to start until 4th grade, and they're like, or actually it was a K through 4 class, and the next class was gonna also be 4th and up, and so she's in that class. So she's a 2nd grader, and the youngest kid in that class is 5th grade. Yeah. So she's there, and there's been some times in the class when the teacher is asking them to write down dance steps, and she is incredibly self-conscious and embarrassed about it because all the other kids can write the dance steps and she's struggling with spelling.
And do it quickly. Well, it's because they're 12.
Right. They're much older than her.
They're not 8 years old.
She's there because she's a very talented dancer. They didn't move her up because of her writing ability. And the teacher is very understanding of this.
She's aware of it too, yeah.
She's not pushing it in any way. Yeah. But the other day, our daughter came home and she was very quiet for the whole evening. And you said to me, something happened at dance class. I don't know what it was, but something happened. And it took us a few hours to get it out of her. But eventually we realized that she is in a K through 2 reading class. And one of her reading spelling assignments fell out of her backpack as she was getting her Irish dance shoes out. Yeah. And so it fell out in front of the other kids. And she was really embarrassed about the level that she's doing. And so we had to have this big talk about not only are you doing things at the right level for you, but also every one of those kids has their own diverse strengths and weaknesses. There are kids in that class that are above grade level in some things and maybe below grade level in other things. You are there because you're an exceptional dancer.
But
maybe
there's
those
also-
kids wouldn't have moved up that quickly.
There's also
Who
girls.
knows, right?
There's a girl in her class that we know practices for an hour and a half a day.
That's right.
You do about 10 to 15 minutes. Right?
That's right. So we talked about like
Yeah.
everyone's different. Everyone learns at a different pace, has different strengths and weaknesses, and everyone has different levels, like you say, of work ethic too that they're putting into it. This girl dances for, multiple hours a day, depending on, because she's in like 3 different dance classes. And she does it because dance is her whole life.
She loves it.
She loves it. It's her passion.
And
so
we had to tell her, I'm like, hey, what would you do if nobody was in your way? She goes, I would listen to audiobooks and I'd play Lego.
right.
And I'm like, okay, there you go. Imagine you had that level of passion for dance.
Right.
That's what she has. And she's like, oh, she kind of understood. Right?
Exactly. It's like, you have, our daughter has kind of varied passions. She does not, there's not like one thing she's big on.
She likes fashion and design.
But this
and
other
stuff,
gal is, this other girl is just like dances her life, right? So of course she's an excellent dancer. She practices all the time. And
She's probably the best dancer in your class, right?
Right.
You're comparing yourself against the number one kid who is easily 4 or 5 years older than you.
right. And who works at it
Yeah.
hours and hours
Yeah.
every day. I mean, her mom says that if she's not at school, she's dancing.
It's amazing.
So that this is a hard one for us, and just reminding our daughter that everybody has these strengths and weaknesses, starting to help her and trying to help her recognize her own uniqueness and encouraging her to like find what she's passionate about. This other girl is really passionate about dance. What are you passionate about?
But also to like, not just identify what that passion is, but to accentuate the things you're really good at.
Yeah,
Like,
let's
look at
celebrate
what
your achievements.
Look at what you're able to do. Like, I'm right now in between sports seasons, and so we're practicing basketball and volleyball. And, we're doing basketball drills and doing dribble drills, and we're, that's part of our homeschool PE class. And and I'm having her do volleyball stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, she's like pretty good at volleyball. And I'm like, maybe volleyball is her track or whatnot. Like, you just have this. And I'm telling her, I'm like, you're doing really good in basketball. I'm really proud of how hard you're working. But man, you're really good in volleyball. And I'll tell her and be like, you're serving it like super far and you're able to dig balls out of it. And I'm like, that's really amazing. And
Right.
she's like, oh, I didn't know I was good in that. I'm like, well, I noticed. Like,
Right.
I want you to notice.
Well, she told me the other night, she goes, do you think Daddy'd be upset if he knew that I liked volleyball more than basketball?
No.
And I said,
No.
absolutely not. We want you to find something active that you love doing.
Yeah.
If that's volleyball, great. If it's swimming, great. If it's hiking, great.
Yeah.
We want you, and she's like, and she's asking about being active. And we're like, we want you to be healthy and we want you to be fulfilled and do something that is good for both your mind and your body.
Yep.
Right. And so, yeah, really celebrating what they're good at, I think, is helping us to help her.
Offset the Joneses push, like where you're in that moment where they're feeling self-conscious about what they're doing, to accentuate what they're good at, show that other kids are not as good at other things, and that's okay. And you're just like those kids.
And it's not, it's absolutely
but you're really
not,
good at these other things.
and it's not about putting down other kids.
No, absolutely not.
And so that was
But showing them that, look, every kid has positives and things that they need to work on and things they're really good on. And you're no different than those kids. You just have different things you're good at. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And we had to I had to steer her away, because the first thing she was doing is she was like, oh, well, so-and-so doesn't do math as well as me. And so-and-so, she immediately
Starts
started
putting down. Yeah.
Right. She started
Yeah.
putting down, and I had to really quickly stop that. It's like, no. By saying that everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, we are not putting down anyone else. We're just saying that, I was telling her, like, no kid in that class is great at everything. Everyone has something that they're struggling with.
Yeah.
You don't know what it is because you only see them for 50 minutes once a week. And all you do is dance, and you sometimes write a few things. You don't know what else they might struggle with.
Yeah.
But no one is perfect at everything.
It's almost teaching them the empathy, right? Like understanding, where they are and where you are, and that relativeness, and just saying, like, it's okay for them not to be great, and it's okay for you to not be great, as long as we're working towards something. I absolutely agree. I think that's the right way to go and the right path to go. Next thing we talked about a little bit is kind of this lifelong learning journey. And I think one way to kind of showcase that type of passion, we want them to be lifelong learners. We want our kids to be passionate about, what they're doing and what they're learning, and they want to carry that forward in their whole lives. The best way to do that, I think, is to emulate that. Mm-hmm. And I really take extra care and moments to point that out to my daughter that, like if I'm reading a book, like a history book, right? And I'll point it out to my daughter and I'll say, Daddy's reading this book here. And she goes, oh, that's cool. The reason why I'm doing this is because I'm really passionate about learning more history. You're learning history right now with ancient civilizations, and Daddy's learning history about our country. Mm-hmm. And I want to know about some famous people, some, famous presidents and famous things that happened. And for me, it's really important for Daddy that I'm learning as well. And she's like, oh, I didn't know you were learning too. And, I could end up taking out a math book and saying, I want to relearn calculus because I just want to be passionate about it. Or Daddy's reading these books so he can be a better writer, or I'm doing these things so I can be more talented. One of the funny things that actually very funny is when we're doing our basketball practice, and I'm like doing it with her because I've noticed that if I just have her to go do it, she doesn't practice very hard. Mm-hmm. And I went out there and I said, hey, Daddy's and you and I are going to be doing this dribble drills together. I said, because Daddy wants to be better at dribbling as well. She goes, but Daddy, you're really good at dribbling. You're really good. I'm like, I could be better and I want to get better and I want to practice and I want to practice with you. And doing the drills that you're doing is going to make me even better as well. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, Daddy's not great dribbling with his left hand. I'm okay and everything. And I played basketball for like a quarter of a century, right? So I'm not terrible at basketball. But I'm doing it with her and I'm showing her that kind of that lifelong journey of learning that it's not, whether it's a physical activity, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's history, whether it's math, whether it's, whatever it is. I do this with math as well, where I have her instead of creating a problem, I ask her to create a problem. I say, you got to quiz Daddy today. I got to make sure Daddy knows how to do this. And she like loves that, right?
Well, I'm glad she doesn't do that for me because long division is something I have forgotten.
But, like just engaging with the act of lifelong learning for me, showing them and modeling that, I think modeling that behavior is probably the best thing that you can do. And actually point it out, like actually take an effort to point out the fact that you are, learning this or learning that, and because you want to keep learning, I think is the best way to kind of do that. And it brings out that drive to learn, that will to learn. And I think it can help overcome some of these other aspects where we feel we might be deficient in areas, to acknowledge that we are, as adults, as parents, are deficient in areas and we're trying to improve too. Daddy's working on his art because I want to be a better artist too. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, Daddy, I'm not a very good artist. Well, let's work together. Let's do it together. And we're going to improve together.
I think showing your own vulnerability is really important too, right? We talked about this the other night when she was upset. And I'm like, there are so many things that I want to learn. And there's so many things that I'd love to be better at. And it's one of the reasons why I'm in graduate school right now. And we kind of talked all about that.
That's a great one.
Why, constantly learning and, just trying to, I'm trying to manage her self-esteem, because if we do the constant comparison, or if we let our kids do this comparison, it really hurts their self-esteem. So one of the things that I had read was, helping your child to set realistic goals and then celebrate their own progress along the way. That way we can focus on that effort you're talking about, the perseverance and their growth, rather than comparing to others. So that's what we've been doing lately with these books. Is I realized after I had kind of read this, I'm like, oh, this is kind of what we've been doing, where we've been saying like, hey, look, let's go back to All About Reading Level 1 and let's have you read a book here. And look how easy this is for you now. Look how far you've come. Yeah. Because we know this is a challenge for you. And I'm so proud of you.
That's what we've been reading, the level 2 books recently. And we're almost through the first book. I'm like, sweetie, this took you months and months of effort just last year, beginning of last year, for you to get through this portion of the book. And look at what you did. You're reading a story every single day. And now we're at the end of this book, and it took us 2 weeks to get to the end of this book. It took you 6 months to do this before. And she's like, wow, like I am more accomplished at this skill now. I am better at this. And really, I think comparing, like the best way you can compare is not against other kids, but against the growth that your child has already seen.
Absolutely.
Because you want to instill that thing that you are getting better. Because sometimes it feels like in the moment, in the day-to-day, you can't see that growth. The only time sometimes as parents we're like, is that kid growing? Because in the day-to-day, it's hard to see, that they're growing.
It's hard to see.
And to showcase that and say, listen, sweetie, just last year, you were just learning how to carry the one and addition, right? And now you're doing multiplication and division over here. You have come a long way.
Absolutely.
You're an amazing, kid. Or look at how well you're reading, or look at your art from last year, or your handwriting from last year. Look at it's better now. Look how much better this is. You're doing so good. And the development is because you worked hard. And that's always something I always heard people, and we've interviewed a number of educators, and they said it's not the accomplishment that you want to praise, like the outcome. You want to praise the effort.
Absolutely.
Because what you want to instill is not the success or the grade or the outcome, but you want to incentivize that hard work, because that's really the skill that you're actually trying to get into them.
Well, right. We want our kids to be resilient, and we want them to look at challenges as an opportunity to grow. So developing that growth mindset in our kids, and frankly in ourselves, is a tough thing to do, but I think it's so important. And so this remembering that, that those constant comparisons for yourself too, as an educator, right? You're thinking like, I'm not being successful. My child isn't enjoying this, or my child is not growing. Their skills aren't improving fast enough with this subject. What am I doing wrong? Because so-and-so's a better teacher than me.
I have felt that 100 times. Yeah. Like, is she failing at reading because I've been here for 4 years trying this? Is it my fault? Right? Like, it's a legitimate question.
But I think we have to stop comparing ourselves to others and look at the growth that, she's had, and that you're a part of that, and you're part of that partnership. I mean, at the end of the day, homeschooling and this mindset that we want our kids to get, it's to embrace the lifelong learning journey. If we focus so much on comparing our kids to others and how they're doing, or comparing them against some arbitrary standard set by the state, what is that doing for them and facilitating their love of learning long term? I was talking to our daughter's preschool teacher. Our younger goes a couple of days a week for a few hours. And the preschool teacher said her sister teaches in another school district, teaches kindergarten. And she gave me all of the list of things they wanted the kids to do by kindergarten. I'm like, that's pretty extensive.
Pretty extensive.
It was really crazy. And she's like, yeah, I mean, it's almost like kindergarten's now first grade, and preschool is an absolute prerequisite. So you better be able to afford preschool or do extensive things at home, because in these local school districts, you needed to know. I mean, the kids needed to be able to do like counting up to 20, know all their letters, hold their pencils in a pencil grip,
basic
write
addition,
their name.
Addition up to 10, I think, as well.
Yeah. I mean, it was just like,
oh my gosh.
Wow. I mean, kindergarten, I feel like you should be able to walk in as a blank slate, but that's not, I mean, it was that way when we were kids, right?
Yeah, right.
That's not the way it is now. And so, talking with her about this, I was just like, wow. I don't know that that's a realistic standard, and we can debate whether that's a realistic standard or not, and everyone can feel differently about it. But the idea of not just comparing our kids to others, but comparing them to these arbitrary type standards or common core standards. Now, if you want to re-enter the school district, so you're going to be very aware of, hey, this is what the school district's teaching, and I want to make sure that my kid's up to that level, so that when they go back in, there's not a struggle, which I totally understand. But if you're in homeschooling for the longer haul, I don't think it matters.
No.
What they're doing, or when they think that milestone should be achieved. It should be achieved when it's right for our kids on their own unique journey.
And that is a hard thing, because how much do we value resiliency and stick-to-itiveness and a little bit of grit and the difficulty versus burning out your child, pushing them when they're not ready. If unfortunately, if your child has like learning difficulties in certain areas and something like that, I mean, the expectations have to change and have to adjust. And I think that's the beauty of homeschooling, is that we can all move at this pace that is their pace, right? And be able to push and try to find that, as you said, the optimal path towards the goal of education. And really, we're just trying to get them to be excited about something, and hopefully, in 12 years, get off to college and get a job,
or go right into
the workforce, or whatever
they're going to do, whatever their path is.
Whatever that path is, we want them to be successful, happy people, and that's really what we want them all to be. And success for a lot of people is different in different mindsets, right?
Absolutely.
I want to be a CEO of a company, or I want to own my own company, or I just want to...
I want to have a family.
I want to have a family and have a great life with my kids and homeschool them and
Right.
whatnot. Whatever that is, whatever that path is we want to give them the tools to get there.
Right. And we want to instill that curiosity and that love of learning, right? So that if they're constantly feeling like we're comparing them to others or they're comparing themselves to others, then that's just going to lead to them feeling inadequate and stressed and, not wanting to learn.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to take the stress out of this for ourselves and for our kids. I think this is really helpful. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to remember that homeschooling, it's an amazing opportunity for us to make these meaningful connections, to foster really deep learning experiences, cultivate this lifelong love of learning for our kids. And if we can just embrace the journey and celebrate all the successes and enjoy all of these moments that we get to spend together, I think that's the best thing that we can do. Constantly comparing ourselves to the Joneses, whoever that is.
Joneses.
Yeah, whoever that is in your circle. We know how hard it is not to do that. We struggle against it every day. So this episode, I hope, is helpful for you, but I think it's helpful for us too, because we've got to remember that we have to just kind of turn away from our child's best friend who's reading chapter books and just say, you know what, our daughter's on her own journey and that's okay.
Yeah, it's always one of those things where I think it's a sign of that, that kind of wisdom and stuff. There's like, oh, someone's super successful. Man, I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, I'm happy
God,
for
I'm
you.
so happy for you and what you're able to achieve and hopefully you can pay it forward type of thing. And just, feeling that generosity and that empathy that instead of trying to compare yourself always to someone else, to be able to be happy with what you are and what you're able to do and what you're best at.
And to be proud of yourself. I told our daughter, something like that happens again where your sheets fall out. I said, don't be embarrassed.
Yeah.
I said, if somebody says, oh gosh, aren't those sheets for little kids or something?
Yeah.
You can say, reading is a challenge for me and I'm working really hard at it. Mm-hmm. And I said, never be embarrassed by that.
Yeah.
That something is a challenge and you're working really hard at it.
Yeah.
Let's be proud of the work that we're putting in. Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time.
Happy homeschooling!